This is Oromo Voice Radio English program. Oromo Voice Radio is broadcasting to Oromia at 16-meter band or 17,850 kilohertz or on oromovoice.org website. OVR broadcasts Oromia Insight program every Monday for 15 minutes at 7:15 p.m. Oromia local time. Welcome to Oromia Insight program.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Ali Galeto. Our guest today is Professor Mohammed Hassen from Department of History, Georgia State University, Atlanta, USA. Recently, Professor Mohammed released a new book, The Oromo and the Christian Kingdom of Ethiopia. Professor will tell us about this book and more. Welcome, Professor Mohammed.
Ali, thank you.
Let's start with the title of the book, The Oromo and the Christian Kingdom of Ethiopia. Why you choose this title?
Oh, that is a very good question for anyone who reads Ethiopian history. Up to now, everything that was written about the Oromo depicts the Oromo as the 16th century immigrants, as people who came into the country from outside that country. And what I wanted to establish in this book is that the Oromos are an indigenous population in Ethiopia, in the Horn of Africa. The Oromo never, and I use this word very seriously, I don't abuse words. The Oromo never came outside of Ethiopia. They have always lived as an integral part of Cushitic language-speaking family of peoples. The Oromo have really lived in what is today Ethiopia, in the northern part, in the central, in the southern part of the country. And the Cushitic language speakers spread from what is today Eastern Sudan through Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, and there are even elements of Cushitic language speakers in Tanzania. There are about 40 Cushitic language groups in Africa. Of this, the single largest one is the Oromo language, spoken by millions of people, somewhere between 35 and 40 million people. And basically, the Oromo are really a large group of people. And what I wanted to show in this book is that the Oromos are as indigenous to the country as other groups. And why I chose 1300, I should have started a bit earlier. Actually, the narratives in the book really goes further up to 1200. But we started having written evidences. Historians do not speculate. Historians do not simply get up and write saying, I think it happened this way. History is never written that way. History is written on the basis of tangible evidence. Evidence that could be checked, counter-checked. And there are written evidence which refers to a number of Oromo clans within the Christian kingdom, and the Christian kingdom itself actually consolidated itself around 1300. Shortly after 1300, although the dynasty was formed around 1270, basically it was around 1300. And I want to show with tangible evidence the presence of a number of Oromo groups, some of which I'll mention later on, within the Christian kingdom. Why did historians who wrote about Ethiopian history, about the Oromo, then ignore the evidence that is there to be seen? The evidence that are within the chronicles of the Christian kingdom itself, within the church hagiographies, within the church literature itself. Why did Ethiopian historians as well as European historians ignore these facts? There are many reasons why they ignored it. I just want to mention only two. The first one is the credence that was given to a manuscript authored by a man known as Abba Bahare about 400 years ago. He wrote actually a 12-page manuscript in 1593. Abba Bahare, we now know his homeland was around what is today the city of Shashamane, and he wrote this manuscript. In this manuscript, he says the people he calls Galla, and the Oromo do not call themselves Galla. Galla is a pejorative term, a term of insult, abuse, in many ways similar to what Americans used to call African Americans as nigger, or what the whites in South Africa call the South African population as kafir. Basically, Galla was the term of insult which was imposed on the Oromo. There is not a single Oromo clan or a single Oromo Gosa that uses Galla as its identification. Basically, it was a name that was imposed on the Oromo. So, to return to Abba Bahare, he said these people attacked the province of Bale, historical Bale, not present Bale. Historical Bale was located in the region of what is today Arsi, in the northern area of what is today Arsi. And on the basis of internal evidence, that date when they attacked was probably around 1522. It was something that happened almost 600 years ago. And scholars simply assumed and gave great deal of credibility to this manuscript. Remember, Abba Bahare was talking about what happened in his own village, the information he gathered. He was even not born at the time when the supposed attack took place. After all, Abba Bahare was born only in 1535, and he wrote 70 years later. Remember, he wrote in 1593, and some of it definitely was speculation. Everything he wrote was accepted as if it was basically the word of the Bible, of the Quran, as if they were the words of God. That is one. And the second reason why historians did not look at facts that were already there within the sources is because many scholars, both Ethiopians and foreigners, really assumed that the Oromo originated from beyond what is today Ethiopia. There were many speculations that they came from many far away, crossing oceans and so on, all of which were simply really nonsense. And here is the point. The Oromo for a long time remained a pre-literate society. They did not write about their encounter with the Christians, with the Muslim population, which really meant the Oromo encounter with the Christians, with the Muslims, and that encounter involved warfare. That encounter was written by the Christian court chroniclers. And the Christian court chroniclers depicted the Oromo as invaders, as barbarians, as uncivilized people who suddenly came and overwhelmed the Christian kingdom. In the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, before their conquest, definitely the Oromo were very powerful people. I'm not exaggerating, and anyone who reads the book will clearly understand the Oromo military strength. And that part is very, very clear. And the court chroniclers simply depicted the Oromo as very aggressive, wild people. And this savagery they depict about the Oromo really took on the life of its own when European missionaries, especially in the 16th century, the Portuguese missionaries, travelers, diplomats in the 17th, 18th century arrived. Remember, foreigners, when they arrived at the court of the Christian kingdom. And the people they interact with were basically the Christians, and the literature they could consult was what was written about the Oromo, and anything that was written was really basically biased, and they took on the anti-Oromo perception of the Christians. Those, both the local chroniclers and European missionaries, travelers, diplomats who all the way up to 19th century who wrote about the Oromo, none of them spoke Oromo language. None of them talked to the Oromo about their history. None of them knew Oromo way of life. They even did not include the name Oromo in what they wrote, basically, which really meant what was written about the Oromo simply was really a biased version of the history. What the book clearly shows is that the Oromo were within the old Christian kingdom starting from 1300, because the written evidence, as I mentioned earlier, clearly indicates that aspect all the way up to 1700. And in these 400 years, what I have tried to cover in 8 chapters of the book is really the interaction between the Christian Amara as well as Tigrayans, as well as the Muslim societies and the Oromo in what is today the Ethiopian region.
So the book is 8 chapters. What each chapter cover?
It is not easy to briefly present, something that was covered in 380 pages in 8 chapters. Let me simply say the first chapter basically explores the interaction between the Christians, the Muslims, and the Oromo in the region of what is today Shawa, starting in 1300. A little bit earlier, from Shawa, southern Wallo, and then southern areas. And what it really shows is the influence, the Oromo influence on the Christians and the Muslims, and the Muslim influence on the Oromo. And the first chapter is about 54 pages. And this really shows how much the influence was both ways. The influence going back, the Oromo institution, the Oromo belief, the Oromo moiety system, the division of the Oromo into, 2 major moiety systems, Borana and Barento, their origin, the Kalu institution, and the tradition of the Abba Muda, the pilgrimage to the Abba Muda. It covers all this, and it really shows similarities between the Christian practice of going on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, the Muslim practice of going to Mecca and the Medina on pilgrimage, and the Oromo for centuries were basically going on pilgrimage from what is today Wallo, from Wallaga, from Harar, from Kenya, from Shawa, all the way to what is today Bale and the Sidamo areas. And what the first chapter basically tries to show readers is how much interaction really existed between the 3 communities, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Oromo. Chapter 2 presents evidence from the Christian sources as well as from the Muslim sources, the presence of the Oromo in the region going back to 1300 and a little before. And the Christian sources mention these Oromo Gosa names, clan names, descent groups. Just listen to this: Galan,